Call the meeting to order. This is the September 23rd, 2014 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. The first item on our agenda is meeting minutes from September 9th, 2014. Motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Alessi.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coleman. Everybody have, anybody have any questions on the meeting minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes carry unanimously. Next item on our agenda is 144 Tuller Road. It's a request of Attorney Fitzpatrick for a 90-day extension for filing a final subdivision map.
This, as you know, is a 6-lot subdivision that was ultimately approved by this commission. This is the first extension. There were, if you may recall, there were some sightline easements that were required as a condition of approval. They're finalizing those and hope to have those in place within this 90-day extension period.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coleman. This is as of right, so I don't know that there's really any discussion necessary. Any maybe questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item carries unanimously. Next item is 411 Bronson Road, the request of SPA Inc. for a 50% release of a $29,160 bond pertaining to subdivision improvements in an A zone.
This is a 2-lot subdivision on the corner of Bronson Road and Broad River Lane. One of the 2 lots has been built and completed. The sidewalk improvements that were required here have been installed. And there is a note or a memo or an email, I should say, in your packet from the engineering department concurring that 50% of the work is completed and recommending a 50% release of the bond.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alessi.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coleman. Question?
Is there a question, Mr. Woods? Have all the I haven't been by it. Have all the sidewalks, curbs that they were required to be built been built?
I know that along Bronson Road, certainly, and along the frontage of the house that was constructed, I'm pretty sure it was extended across the lot that is yet to be built. But in any, even if they're not, they've got more than 50% of the bonded work done. But I didn't drive. I kind of drove by on Bronson, certainly in front of the house. The corner lot's done, and it's along the entire frontage of Bronson. I don't know for certain whether it goes across the existing vacant lot yet, but I would imagine it does.
But this is the first 50% anyway, so we can
That is
confirm
correct.
it before we
Yes,
release the other.
yes, you'll still have half of this amount remaining.
I've seen that as well. Any other questions, comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The item carries unanimously. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion at this time to table the old business and go directly to the public hearing.
Have a second?
I'll second
Second by a motion by Commissioner Alessi to table old business and go directly to public hearing. Second by Commissioner Corcoran. Yeah, we had discussed this briefly at the last meeting. Many members of the public have come out for the public hearing. I think it's a wise idea. We can see what time we have at the end, if we can take some of that up. But we're also missing certain members of the commission who were in attendance and interested in the items as well. So I think that's a wise idea. Any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. We'll go straight into the public hearing. Do we have to reconfigure? We're all set? So the first item on our agenda for public hearing is 3553 and 3571 Post Road, 886 Kings Highway West. The application of Walgreen Eastern Co. Inc. to establish a designed commercial district on land presently zoned designed industrial district and Residence B, continued from September 9, 2014. As well as item number 2, 3541, 3571 Post Road and 886 Kings Highway West, special permit and coastal site plan application of Walgreen Eastern Co. Inc. pertaining to the construction of a new retail building, which was also continued from September 9, 2014. We had previously had a motion to take these both together simultaneously, and Attorney Nuff is here on behalf of the applicant. We had previously concluded applicant's presentation, as well as a certain portion of the public comment, but I understand, Attorney Nuff, you have some additional materials to present.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for the record, John Nuff, 147 Broad Street in Milford, Connecticut, on behalf of the applicant and the property owner. Yes, I spoke today with Assistant Planner Jim Wendt, and also spoke to counsel for the opponents, Joel Green, and we agreed that just for the efficiency of the program, that I would take 2 or 3 minutes just to submit a quick few things, and then I'll turn the dais over to Attorney Green. So very quickly, just in response to the comments from last week, we are submitting a revised landscaping plan. The revisions are fairly straightforward. There are 35 evergreen trees that provide a buffer along Kings Highway West. They were originally scheduled to be 8-foot tall trees, and we're converting those to 12-foot tall trees. So I'm going to submit a revised landscaping plan, and the plan itself looks identical, but it's the plant schedule that's changed, specifically those 35 trees being 4 feet taller than what we originally proposed. I also, I think in sort of the confusion of the end of the hearing last week, failed to submit 4 letters of support that are very fairly brief. I provided copies of these letters to Attorney Green before the hearing tonight, as well as the other plans I'm going to be submitting this evening. So I'll hand those to staff. We also did a quick concept study. The chair had asked last week as to what would happen if we could develop each of the commercial properties individually and the residential properties, and I think we can discuss it after Attorney Green does his presentation. But I think you'll see that there's very little can be developed on those properties individually, anywhere between 800 and 900 square feet. So I'll submit these plans into the record, and then just 2 other things. We had an inconsistency with the size of the basement. We had originally submitted plans showing a 3,000 square foot basement, and then I forget who, but one of the commission members had noticed that our floor plan called out an 1,800 square foot basement. We are proposing an 1,800 square foot basement. So to the extent that there's any references to 3,000 square feet, those are incorrect, and the correct figure is 1,800 square feet. And then the very last thing I have to report is there was some discussion, although not a lot, we didn't get into the details, regarding delivery hours, and I just want to report to the commission that should you be inclined to approve the applications, we would be willing to accept as a condition of approval that our deliveries would be limited between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., and that there be no dumpster pickup before 7 a.m. So that's all that I have. I also want to note, however, that our full team is here: architects, traffic, engineering. So if at any point the commission should have any questions regarding any details of our plan, we have the full team here and can respond to your questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney Green.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. I reside at 52 Stoneley Road in Fairfield. I appear this evening on behalf of the Save Historic Southport Neighborhood Association, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a moment. But There's a Superior Court case from 2008 entitled Brenton versus Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission, and that involved an appeal of the denial of a subdivision or conditions on a subdivision. But I raise it tonight because Judge Radcliffe, in that case, found the following facts. He found these three consolidated appeals concern an application to subdivide property located at 909 Kings Highway West in Fairfield. 909 Kings Highway West, and he goes on to say actually, in a Residence A zone. It is situated at the corner of Kings Highway West and Oxford Road. And just for the Commission's reference, that is directly across Kings Highway West from the site of this proposed development. Judge Radcliffe found the dwelling in which Nancy and Lowell Hess resided for nearly half a century is thought to be the oldest house in the town of Fairfield. It has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1987, although it is not located in an existing historic district. The structure was erected by Captain John Osborne and is all that remains of the 80 acres deeded to Captain Osborne by the town of Fairfield in recognition of his service in the Pequot War of 1637. It is one of three structures in Fairfield listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And he then goes on to discuss the subdivision. So the fact of the matter is, the house across the street from this proposed development and this proposed zone change has existed for some 377 years. And as I sat at the hearing at the last session, I was saddened at the notion that Walgreens, 6,000 stores strong, would try to market a change of zone and a project and anoint itself the gateway to Fairfield. And somehow the good people of Fairfield and the good people of this neighborhood deserve something better after 377 years than this project and the further encroachment into a neighborhood and on a site that once consisted of 80 acres. And so, on behalf of the Save Historic Southport Neighborhood Association, I appear before you in opposition to this application. I would ask that the members of the association, which consists of members of people who all live in the neighborhood on Old Kings Highway and surrounding streets, please rise if you're a member of Save Historic Southport Neighborhood Association. So, thank you. So, it's interesting because this is in Southport and it's not on the harbor. And frankly, if you're driving on Post Road, west or southerly, it's kind of a blur as you go by. It can be a blur, but if you take a left on Old Kings Highway West, or you happen to run through there as I have, you'll see that this is truly a neighborhood. And on the adjacent streets, it is truly a neighborhood. There are basketball hoops, there are kids playing, there are people in their front yard. And there are people who are here tonight who have basically linked arms. They have joined arms because they are concerned about the further encroachment of commercial development into their neighborhood. They're concerned about further unraveling the fabric of the residential character of their neighborhood. They are here trying to hold the line on the invasion of commercial development into this neighborhood that's proposed by virtue of this project. And we are here to ask you, in the exercise of your discretion in terms of the application for a zone change, to help protect this neighborhood. And there are several reasons, and I'll spend more time talking about them as I go forward. But they include that we are a town of neighborhoods. We value neighborhoods, we preserve neighborhoods. It's evident everywhere in our plan of conservation and development. And I'd like to share some sections of that with you. And I really didn't frankly feel that the applicant did justice to the plan of conservation and development. And clearly, as one of the findings in this zone change, you must find consistency with it. And I wanted to provide you with the complete section pertaining to Southport, and that's set forth on page 38 of the Plan of Conservation and Development that I've excerpted for you this evening. And it provides, it describes the characteristics. But let's talk about the policies. And the applicant seemed to center on some of the, more of the design standards, but central to the policies is a clear policy that says encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged. And that is a basic policy. That is good planning in a town like Fairfield, and it is a basic policy. And certainly, another policy is that undeveloped parcels should be considered for acquisition by the town of Fairfield for open space. We have seen in other areas of town, the town has in fact acquired pieces of property. I'm reminded of the so-called pocket park at the top of Tunxus Hill and Black Rock Turnpike, opposite where Chips is now. You'll see there's a greenway, and I recall being on the RTM when that was acquired by the town, and certainly a major policy was creating green spaces in commercial areas, and I would submit that that might be something that the commission might consider in terms of planning purposes. Next, we've talked about certainly the historic significance of the neighborhood by virtue of Judge Radcliffe's findings in that case, and I think that certainly this commission should be mindful of the need to maintain the historic character. I think that this is certainly one of the oldest neighborhoods in Southport. Once you make a zone change, it basically, as we've seen, achieves great momentum, and while I won't go as far as to say that it is irreversible, I haven't seen too many reversals in terms of changes from commercial property back to residential in my 30 years in this field, and I can't think of an instance, frankly, but I think we can all agree it really doesn't happen very often. I think that the commission should also bear in mind that while a Walgreens is being described, and while this gateway project as a Walgreens has been described, that once this property is rezoned, it doesn't have to be a Walgreens. And Walgreens can change its mind. Things change, things happen, economies, there are a variety of factors. So basically, then, you're opening the door to any one of the uses approved in the design commercial district. And I mean, they include a variety of uses, and I'm not suggesting that any one of these uses is necessarily offensive or negative, but it may not be appropriate. And as you contemplate a zone change, consider that uses such as fast food, drive-through restaurants, liquor stores, gas stations, and once again, these are resources that we do need in our town in terms of having an array of services, an array of offerings, and certainly an array of retail stores. But it doesn't mean that every single use is appropriate in every place, and I don't think that opening the door to any particular use that encroaches on this residential neighborhood would be appropriate. Then there's the issue of precedent, because there's a history on this site, but there's also a more recent history. And the more recent history really relates to how this site has been used and how this site has been developed. And if you'll bear with me for one moment.
Attorney Green, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
On page 39, on the policies, it does say here, rezoning of the designed industrial district land along the Post Road to design commercial district is recommended. And it also says below that, the transition of industrial properties in the village area to use appropriate for a neighborhood commercial district should be supported.
And that's a great point, and I would address that as follows. One of the points I was about to get to is this. My clients are not opposed to the notion of the properties on the Post Road themselves being designed commercial. And I'm not sure that anyone contemplates necessarily that industrial is necessarily appropriate on the Post Road as a planning matter at this point.
I mean,
Because-
you'll agree that it's somewhat of a historic anomaly that there are 2 or 3 parcels that are continued to be zoned industrial in this.
And that goes to the fact that this is historic. And who knows what those were used for 100 years ago, 200 years ago, or 300 years ago, or more.
Yeah, but we
But-
have to live in 2014. We can't live in 300 years ago.
That's correct. And the point is that that does not mean that the front of the parcel cannot be designed commercial, but the back of the parcel, which is currently residential, should not be rezoned to accommodate that. And I will jump ahead and tell you that while I was going to really get into the notion that those properties can be developed, the applicant has basically conceded that in terms of even a design commercial zone by providing you with some drawings this evening that show uses. Now, those uses are admittedly small in terms of their footprint, but the applicant does not, for example, combine them into one use. The applicant does not consider the notion, for example, of some slightly higher density residential development there, or some slightly higher residential development combined with commercial, or any one of a number of permitted uses. And the point is, your zoning regulations provide a number of uses in a design commercial zone that are not just a retail store that's 900 feet or whatever the applicant described for you. There are many uses. The property is not unusable as the applicant would suggest, nor would I simply accept that because there are a variety of things that can happen. The property can be rezoned in a different way on the front. The applicant could, under certain circumstances, potentially apply for a variance in terms of the front. This commission might, as a planning matter, say that there are properties that are smaller design commercial properties such as these, and this commission could adopt different regulations that pertain to these. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities, and it is not a reason to rezone the entire site and get rid of the residential lots on Kings Highway West, I'm sorry, to achieve that.
Well, we would still have a commercial lot on Kings Highway West, according to the...
I understand that.
One of them does have, well, two
pieces.
Two in the drawing that we have in front of us. The one on the very corner is already commercial.
Understood.
The one next to it has frontage on both Post Road and Kings Highway West, which is from front to back commercial. It's the next two, which are split down the middle, the front portion of which are industrial, and
Yes.
the portion on Kings Highway West, which are residential.
Correct.
And so, what Commissioner Alessi is addressing, which is I think a very fair point, is while the POCD does establish that, encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged, it also does identify that there are issues in the legacy zoning that are anomalies, and that industrial districts along the Post Road converted to designed commercial is recommended.
Yes.
And I guess your position is that you support that with respect to the front half on Post Road, but not with respect to the residential area on the portions on Kings Highway West
That
that
is
are
correct.
residential.
That is correct. And we can't, and once again, if the commission wants to rezone half of the DCD on Kings Highway West into residential, I'm sure that everyone here would appreciate it. But I understand, as I've said, that these things don't generally reverse, and we can't change what is necessarily. But in terms of the erosion by virtue of commercial development into the residential neighborhood, but we're asking you to hold the line, because what happens is you move over one property and it becomes designed commercial, and then someday someone may come in and say, well, let's go a little further, and it's creep. And it's commercial creep into this residential zone, and I think now is the time to draw the line on that. And consistent with the clear policy that says, the clear policy which says, once again, encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged. And there's no question that across the street, there are homes. People live here.
That's true, but on this street here, we do have residential and commercial already, no? On this side of the street.
Yes,
On the other side of the
that's
three
right.
houses, we already have commercial, and we have a driveway coming out on Kings Highway West, don't we?
We do.
So we have a mixture of everything here. We have commercial, I think residential towards, even if you go, industrial if you go a little bit further. West, on the Westport line, I believe it's industrial, then it comes to commercial, and then we have a few lots of residential, and then we're going back to 2 lots of commercial again.
And for that reason, it is even more important that you protect the remaining residential uses on Kings Highway West, for that very reason, because the encroachment is there. You are correct. We all recognize it, we all live with it. But this is a neighborhood, and once again, people live here. And they deserve that protection of basically preserving what is left, and it is a thriving residential neighborhood. And yes, there are encroachments, but this is the moment to draw the line. This is not the moment to further erode it. That's my point.
Do you know the history, and why wasn't the line drawn when that driveway came back behind Waco Restaurant, whatever it was?
Well, I do have some history, actually, that I was about to share with you, and the fact of the matter is,
I know some of the history. There's application.
you did.
But later on, yeah.
Please continue.
Go ahead, you should answer that.
Forgive the digression.
886 Kings Highway West was a 10-room colonial which was built in 1947. It had 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. It was 2,174 square feet. It had a shed. It was demolished in 2010. 3541 Post Road had an 8-room colonial built in 1850. It was 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. It had 1,680 square feet. It had a 2-car garage. And it was demolished in 2010. 3553 Post Road was vacant land. From 1983 revaluation forward, it doesn't indicate that there was a structure on it. And 3571 Post Road is vacant land, and the 83 revaluation forward does not indicate a house or other structure. But I think this may be a great juncture to provide you with some more information, and I'd like to call Will Steger forward, who will address the commission later, but he has compiled a very interesting exhibit for the commission that I think would answer your question about the history of the site very nicely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm hopeful of being able to speak individually as a property owner, essentially across the street as well, a little bit later. These exhibits...
Your name and capacity?
I'm sorry,
right now?
Will Steger. I'm at 943 Kings Highway West. Essentially across the street from the residential lots that we're discussing and about 3 houses down towards Westport.
And you're engaged as a consultant for the association?
No,
Or
I'm
you-
sorry. So
you
I'm a
personally?
property owner across the street and one of the Save Historic Southport Association members. We actually have 185 members who are all aligned in our position against a zone change and against a retail business the size of Walgreens. We started as a group of about 30. There were the neighbors directly across the street from this site and along Oxford Road and in the Pequot Landing condominium community and on into Westport on Greens Farms Road, which is a continuation of Kings Highway West, and then across the street on Hull's Highway and so forth. We then discussed, more and more people sort of came to our community groups after we had heard about this proposed development, which we hadn't until a couple of months ago, and ultimately learned that, again, they're within about a 1,500 foot radius of this proposed development. We have 185 signatories, 100% aligned against a zone change and against a large retail business. So I'm just a neighbor who owns property with my children and wife across the street, and we all we all share passionately our position against this encroachment and this essentially violation of what we feel is a safe residential neighborhood and shouldn't have a giant store right on our street.
Right, I guess perhaps the question for Attorney Green, is he speaking on behalf of himself individually or on behalf of the group?
He's speaking on behalf of the group, and will speak about the methodology in creating this exhibit.
Okay. So then I have a question about something that you just said.
Yes, sir.
In terms of the objection to the size of the business. You know, the height requirement, or the maximum height for a building, regardless of whether it's one of these lots or all of these lots, is 40 feet. And the proposed structure is a height of, I think, 27 feet. And so, in that sense, and I'm not speaking about a coordination of all the lots, but just in its basic terms, is a size of a building that is less than what could be built there. Is the size of the retail establishment, as you said, relative to the physical proposal, or is it that it's Walgreens? Is it that it's a national chain proposed business to be going in there?
Both, yes, sorry.
All right, you may.
Essentially both. The height is not so much the issue that we have objected to as a group. It's the square footage size of the establishment itself in a residential neighborhood. And it's a busy retail establishment. You know, there's a long list of issues that we all have with Walgreens specifically and the quality of the sort of environment around a Walgreens and with the drive-through especially, with the garbage trucks, with light pollution and noise pollution and garbage and crowds and safety. I mean, we have a long list, which I was planning on getting into when I was up here to speak really for myself and for the group. But it's both, to answer your question. It's not so much the height, but it's not so much whether it's within reasonable size compared to other Walgreens or other retail establishments. It's that this is a residential street, and what we're about to show you in these exhibits is it has been a residential street up until 2010 on this lot included, let alone for 377 years. And it's a bit shocking when you take a look at the before and after from the last few years, and a business the size of Walgreens with the traffic the size of Walgreens from a retail standpoint on a residential street that is residential zoned and has been residential zoned since, well, for a long time, causes safety concerns for us and causes erosion of the neighborhood quality for us.
Commissioner Lesson?
you know, it seems, from what I'm hearing you say, it just seems we don't like Walgreens. Because the building could be made bigger for this lot. And, you know, there's a commercial property,
If I may though,
this piece here.
if I may, that wasn't my answer. You just mentioned that,
Well, that's what I'm getting from you, though.
but that's not what I
The
said.
problem is, what happens if this piece here gets developed as a commercial property and becomes a hookah lounge?
Which piece?
This one on the end, next to the second piece on the corner. Well, we see a commercial, we're gonna, you know, if we, it's an agreement, it's a question for you.
I would say if that were,
What happens if we get development that we just don't want there? And then the neighbors,
There are 180 some odd members of Save Historic South, SHSNA. Now, let me suggest this to you. Across the street at 909, in a house that's 377 years old, is an owner who has gone to painstaking details to restore this house in its original historic state. If you drive by it, it's fabulous. Now, for all of his efforts, even though you say, wow, this is only 27 feet, for all of his efforts, he gets to look out of his front window, and instead of looking at the houses that you see that formerly existed here, he has the pleasure of looking over what are 12-foot trees to see the 27-foot-high Walgreens store 25 feet off the rear property line. That's his prize. Next door at 902 Kings Highway is a resident whose house is 40 feet from the drive-through window. And you know and I know that there could be a variety of impacts of having a drive-through window 40 feet from your bedroom window and on your second floor looking out at the 27-foot-high structure. And it's not great comfort to have some shrubs there. Further down the road, there are others who are concerned about the impact of traffic, and I understand there's no exit or entrance on Kings Highway West, but they're concerned about the next applicant coming in and saying, well, there's a development here, now we can put a development here because it's only one more lot. And you can have the same argument about all the residents on what I'll call the north side of Kings Highway West. There are other residents who have a variety of concerns. Maybe there are people who don't like Walgreens. And frankly, look, Walgreens, CVS, I mean, they all provide a service. They're all basically department stores. But I will say Walgreens in particular has run a store in a shopping center 600 feet to the west, or I don't know the exact distance, but close by. They've run a store above Nutmeg Lanes in Fairfield. And I'm not sure they've done themselves a favor in terms of referring themselves to themselves as a gateway in terms of how those stores are run and in terms of how those stores are operated. And there are people who might not take kindly to the notion of that. I can't control that. Everyone looks at this differently. But my point is, in the continuum of being across the street or being next door or being 100 yards away or 300 yards away, people have a variety of opinions, but one thing they can agree on for a variety of reasons is they don't think that this is a good fit, and they are certainly concerned about taking away more residential lots and further eroding this residential neighborhood. I called Mr. Stager up, frankly, to just talk about how these exhibits were prepared, and maybe we can get back to that unless...
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you.
one of the reasons we wanted to present these, I believe it's six exhibits to the commission is some of the comments from last week or 2 weeks ago in the presentation, and then a couple of questions that came up sort of made us realize that there might not be a full understanding. Commissioner Alessi, you referenced living now, rather than 377 years ago. Well, 2010 was 4 years ago. I bought my house about a year and a half ago. 2010 is now. And this has not been a vacant, blighted lot forever. If you look at Exhibit 1, it's a shot of Kings Highway West, essentially looking from 909 Kings Highway West, the home that Attorney Green referred to. These pictures above, it's 2008. Again, that's Exhibit 1 on page 1. On the bottom, it's today, although some rocks have been drilled and blasted, and so it's actually a little more scrappy in terms of rocks and boulders on the property. Exhibit 2, also Kings Highway West, looking towards the Post Road, from the corner of Oxford Road and Kings Highway West. Above, again, you see trees and a residence. The prior page had a residence as well. These are the two residences that Attorney Green had referred to that are on the site. That's where there's the proposed development. And again, you look at the bottom of the page of Exhibit 2, and wow, we can see an office building now and an empty, naked lot. It was not the case in 2008, 2009, 2010, or any year prior to that. Exhibit 3 is the view looking essentially from twice as nice on Kings Highway West and looking towards Westport. And again, trees gone, residences gone, and a backhoe that we've enjoyed across the street from us for the entire year and a half that I've been there, essentially. Exhibit 4 is an aerial view. Not sure above the top of the page what year it's from, but sometime prior to 2011. That's the lot in question, excuse me, the site in question, because we've all discussed it's multiple lots, some of which is Residence B. There are two residences there and trees, just like in the rest of the neighborhood. Bottom, a empty lot. Exhibit 5 is the view straight on of one of the homes. I believe it's the view from Kings Highway West. The exact view below now that that perfectly good house has been removed. Exhibit 6 is the other property, again across from Oxford Road. Sure, it might need work like my house needed a little bit when I moved in, but a perfectly good house a few years ago, and now you see what's there. So it really is just shocking to us, actually, who live in the neighborhood, but its context is a proposal has been presented to you all based on, in my opinion, a fiction, which is that there is this gateway property that hasn't been exploited or used in any fashion, and it needs something like a Walgreens or any other business or a unification of zones, when in fact, it's been residential properties just like across the street, just like down the street, essentially since Fairfield was a town. And the only thing that's different is a single property owner tore down those homes, tore out the trees. We have no way of knowing whether that was permitted. We assume it was from the town. I didn't know I could just rip out my house and my trees. But that's what's happened here. So this proposal, we think, should be viewed in the context of the history of this site. And this site has been residential for all intents and purposes since history began in our town. Thank you.
Commissioner Barrett.
I'd like to ask my question, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Stager. Mr. Green, these photos in 2010, the changes in the property, I assume the current the applicant today is the one that owned the property at the time of this?
The applicant has owned the properties, I believe, actually I have that. The applicant has owned the properties generally since 1989.
Applicant doesn't own it.
I'm sorry, I'm correct. The current owner is a corporation, it's an LLC that took title to them in 2008, but as I understand it, the principals of the LLC have owned it since 1989. That refers to 3571. 3541 was acquired by, once again, one of the principals of the LLC in 1994, and it was conveyed to an LLC in 2008. 3553 was the same, acquired in 1994 and conveyed to the LLC in 2008. And 920 Kings Highway West was actually, I believe, acquired in 2008. But I guess,
But my question, the current principal of the LLC owned the property at the time that this was done. Do you
Correct.
know why the houses were taken down?
I don't know why the houses were taken down, but I can say that,
Is it possible that they were condemned and they needed to be demolished and they got all the demolition permits?
they did get demolition permits
Yes.
in 2010, and I did check into that, and that is true.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this property because I was, involved in the town at the time. And then the trees seemed to be all cut down, but then that's a property owner's right to do the trees. But I guess the point that you and Mr. Stager are trying to make is just this before and after of what the property used to look like and what it looks like today.
Correct.
And that was done by the
And the
principal
property,
of
and
the
the-
LLC.
and as the applicant said, the property is not attractive now, and it has not been an attractive site since it was cleared, and it's cleared in a rough state. And I was going to suggest that I think houses generally become blighted through, obviously, poor maintenance, and I recognize that there are a variety of conditions and circumstances, but in this case, you have a commercial property on the front, you have residential properties on the rear. I can only, and it would be only my guess, that they really weren't maintained, and they got run down, and then they were demolished, and the applicant has kind of kept this property, hasn't fenced it, hasn't landscaped it in an attractive way, and it really is in many ways kind of a blighted, unattractive property at this point. And
So presumably, since the applicant owned the land and the residential homes, they were rental properties?
I can't say that. I believe that when Ms. Stenick got up, I believe she indicated that she lived there for...
She did. She
and
did mention that. She
So
lived
I
in one of the
don't know
homes.
which house she lived in, and
Right.
I don't have that kind of history. But I can say that I've driven by the properties many times over the past several years, and the properties over the past several years, and I don't feel that they were really well cared for, or
Right.
even the most basic maintenance. They seem to be overgrown. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that's general consensus, that they were dilapidated.
My point is that I think it's a poor precedent to sort of allow your property to achieve that state, and then
Sure.
kind of
And go in and take it all down and say, now it's a vacant lot, so we need to develop it.
correct.
Yeah, no.
It's an eyesore.
I think that point is made. The parcels are zoned, the two that have the residential fronting Kings Highway West have the industrial portion on the other side fronting Post Road.
Correct.
But those have not been developed. These historical photos don't reveal any development on that side of fronting the Post Road, though, right? I mean,
So I did a sort of a basic search, and we did a basic search of some records in town. I did not do an exhaustive search, and I couldn't find what the historic uses of the industrial sites were. I imagine that someone here may be able to provide that information among the vast resources of our group.
well, at some point, I would be interested to understand whether the industrially zoned lots had ever been used in some capacity and what they were. It might have just been the backyards of the residential homes, and that was it, but that would be interesting to know.
Oh, may I, Mr. Chairman? I
Well, you
think we
can
have
call
that.
whatever witnesses you like.
Well, please come forward.
My name is Peggy Brenton, and I live at 55 Oxford Road. However, the reason I raised my hand at this particular subject was because in 1962, my late husband and I were just married and rented the house that sat on 886 Kings Highway West. We lived there for 2.5 years before we bought our historic house on Oxford Road. So there was nothing on the Post Road behind that house.
It was just
Since
yard.
1962.
Just trees?
Just trees. That's,
Which one,
Okay.
behind both houses? Is that behind
yes,
both houses?
both houses. Trees behind both houses.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Commissioner Corcoran?
Mr. Green, in presenting these before and after pictures, is there some scenario where we would expect the before pictures to be reestablished? I mean, can these lots be, is that the idea here, that we could make them back into this?
You need to use your microphone.
In looking at the before and after pictures, is there some sense here that it can be restored to the way it was before, given the configuration of the lots? I mean, is that why we're seeing the before and after, because it could be that way?
I have not, frankly, investigated what the parameters are, what the various restrictions are in terms of setbacks and that kind of thing, or whether a residential use. I can't offer that opinion as to whether the homes can be rebuilt in their current form, but it seems to me that my sense is that yes, they could be put to a residential use again.
Okay.
But I didn't create a drawing, or I haven't not looked at the setback requirements. All right, so once again, it would be our hope that as a matter of planning, that this commission would decline, just as a matter of open planning, would this commission, that this commission would decline to rezone the residential portion of the site. But I guess the next question is, from a planning standpoint, do we need another pharmacy? And is that a desirable goal? And would that be something that would motivate this commission to say, yes, this zone change would be desirable? I looked into that, and there are a variety of options for pharmacies, and the answer is no, we don't need another pharmacy there. First of all, if 1 minute away at 1790 Post Road, there's a Stop and Shop in Westport that I understand has a pharmacy. 2 minutes away, or 0.82 miles, at 322 Pequot Avenue is Switzer's, which is a pharmacy. 4 minutes away at 2.12 miles at 1326 Post Road, there's a pharmacy called Unity, and I'm not sure what the full name is of that. 5 minutes away, 2.72 miles at 700 Post Road, there's a CVS. 6 minutes away at 1619 Post Road, or 1.84 miles away, is a Rite Aid. 7 minutes away at 1160 Kings Highway Cutoff at the Circle, or 3.94 miles, there is a Stop and Shop. So from sort of a public necessity or need or planning standpoint, I don't think there's any basis to find that we need another pharmacy, and certainly there is also Walgreens at its existing location, which is some 600 feet away. I would suggest as a policy that we shouldn't simply square up zoning districts at the expense of neighborhoods, and we can talk more about that. In terms of the residential use, under any circumstances, whether this building is 27 feet high or whether it's another commercial use, there is impact, there is noise, and it does impact the use and enjoyment of residential properties that abut commercial. And fences are great, bushes are great, shrubs, planted buffers, landscape buffers, but let's face it, if you are next to a commercial development, you know it's there. There are noises associated with it. I appreciate the effort that the applicant has gone to now say we're only going to get deliveries within a limited amount of time. But if on a warm summer night, we've all experienced that. If you have your windows open, sound travels. People come, people go. People blow their horns, people laugh, people shout, there is an impact of commercial use on residential use, and our zoning regulations recognize that they are not necessarily compatible. I would like to offer for the commission at this time a protest petition, and I don't know exactly how many signatures there are, but I can assure you that it is more than 20% of the lots within 500 feet. The petition says, to the Plan and Zoning Commission of the Town of Fairfield, Connecticut, pursuant to Section 8-3B of the Connecticut General Statutes, the undersigned, as the owners of the following properties within 500 feet of the properties located at 3553, 3571 Post Road, and 886 Kings Highway West in Fairfield, Connecticut, hereby object to, protest, and oppose the application for a zone change filed by Walgreens Eastern Company, Inc., to establish a designed commercial district on the subject properties that are presently zoned Residence B and designed industrial. And I'd like to submit that to the commission at this time. I would submit to the commission, however, the warning. I'm sorry. Do you have a copy? Sure. I would, however, submit to the commission that it's my understanding, and I would urge the, I understand that the staff typically reviews these petitions for their conformity with the statute, and to find that they represent the owners of the lots within 20% of the lots within 500 feet. I would urge the staff, and I would urge the commission to make inquiry that the list that was actually provided by the applicant is complete. I have reason to believe, and I suspect, that there are a number of property owners who are not included in the list of abutters within 500 feet.
Meaning what, that the notice is defective?
The notice may be defective, or the ability to assess the petition may be impaired, but I would suggest that there are properties on Aberdeen Way. There's a condominium known as Pequot Landing, and is the rezoning map available? Maybe I could take a quick look at that. And
I'm just wondering what the point of your statement is. So the applicant, well, a list of all residences within 500 feet are required to be notified. That list then was given to you for the purposes of preparing a petition, and you're suggesting that you got 20% of those people that were on the list, right?
As I understand it, the applicant has the burden of listing the owners of properties within 500 feet. On that basis, we did go out and get our petition signed, but I'm not certain that the applicant did, in fact, identify all the property owners within 500 feet. And that included properties on Aberdeen Way and properties on and I can't read the name of the street that Aberdeen Way links to, Southport Place. So I would urge, there's a condominium there, there are individual unit owners there who I understand may not have received notice or are not listed as owners. So I would put that out there, and I just actually became aware of that as I went through the petition today. So I also would, I understand that the applicant has produced these elevations and photographs. I would urge the commission, in exercising good planning, not necessarily to look at kind of in terms of the actual appearance. That doesn't necessarily go towards your planning function. I would propose, I'm going to introduce some speakers, but I will address sort of the other aspects of the application after the speakers and kind of get to more of the nuts and bolts issues, including issues with the plans and elevations, after you've had an opportunity to hear from some of the members of our association. I suppose at this point I'll call Mr. Stager forward to deliver the remarks that he was originally going to provide.
Thank you. Attorney Nutt, you have a question?
Just trying to understand the protocol. Is this just members of the association speaking? Are we opening up completely to the public? I don't know what the format is.
I'm going to simply call a few members of our association
That's right.
forward in the
This is why I asked previously whether Mr. Stager was being called as a witness on behalf of the association or if he was taking the podium and as an individual, because we do have a represented group that's being on behalf of which Attorney Green is making his presentation. To the extent he finishes, he's done, and other members of the public are free to speak during public comment. When they're finished, you will have rebuttal.
Great.
And
Okay.
then when you're finished with rebuttal, the public hearing will be closed. We've gone through this a couple times, and Attorney Green is aware of. I'm not going to simply have members of the public coming up to just kind of give their 2 cents. He's representing a group of many people. I don't expect to hear duplicative remarks from all of the members in seriatim. But he's free to call whatever witnesses he'd like
Okay,
to.
that's fine.
And if those happen to be members of his association to testify with regard to specific subject matters, then that's his prerogative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for your patience in hearing maybe a little too much from me. So I'll try to be brief for this portion, which was the portion I had individually really hoped to be able to express to you. My wife lives along with me at 943 Kings Highway West. Again, my name's Will Stager. We have 3 children, 8, 11, and 13. I would, based on some of the comments at the conclusion of the presentation last week, which was an impressive presentation, which I think $5 billion as a corporation buys you, and some of the comments, all due respect, Commissioner Alessi, about living now and so forth, and hookah joints or whatever potential businesses might exist there. The bottom line on some of the comments that were made last week and some of the questions that have been asked is, one question was, who would want to live there? I think Attorney Nuff said that last week. Another comment that was made was, as in the context of the presentation last week, was that there were these sort of randomly drawn lines demarcating where residential zones and business or commercial zones were outlined many years ago as though it were random. And
Well, it was.
well, one of the things I wanted to say, random or not, however long ago it was, we live there. Who lives there now? We live there.
No, I
live
realize
there.
that, but the reason that was, those comments were made is that when the zoning was initially done, there was a line drawn, literally, 20 or 40 feet from the center line of the post road in both sides, and it cut through various lots. And the result of that now is what I think we've all agreed, including Attorney Green, is an anomaly. We have industrial zoned lots fronting the post road in the middle of a design commercial district. We have one lot that has a sliver of industrial along with residential. I mean, it's that's why that was said, because it happened.
Granted, but my point is, we live there. A number of neighbors live in, and it's a residential neighborhood. And we like living there. We love our neighborhood, and we have neighbors. I have neighbors that take care of their homes. The reference was made to 909 Kings Highway West. Rich Pinto, a couple houses up from it, he must have put $300,000 or $400,000 into his historic home, the oldest house in Fairfield, from what we understand. A new home was built by a gentleman named Joe, I don't know his last name, next to 909 Kings Highway West. It's on the market, I think, for over $1 million, as the appraiser mentioned 2 weeks ago. Joe put his money into that house. Our street is one of residences and families. Some have lived in the neighborhood for 50, 70 years. It's a residential neighborhood. And this site, including residential lots, has been used from a residential standpoint. It's been, whether it's zoned residential throughout the site or not, it's been used as residences until just recently. And we're happy with our neighborhood that way. My kids walk to the bus and walk from the bus. Bus stops on Oxford Road. We bike, walk, jog. Our neighbors take their dogs out for a walk. Attorney Green mentioned he comes and jogs there. I counted 32 joggers, walkers, or bike riders on Sunday when I was out front for about an hour and a half working on my yard. It's a residential neighborhood, and we reject the notion as neighbors not only who abut the individual site, but throughout the entire neighborhood. Again, 185 people is a lot of people. I would say it's pretty hard to find within about a 1,000-foot radius over 200 people that are even there. Okay, and we found 185 like-minded folks that don't want a zone change from residential. It's our residential neighborhood. It is a residential neighborhood. Look, if from a safety standpoint, because it's not just, hey, it's our backyard, don't put it in our backyard, that's not all we're saying. From a safety standpoint, there are families, mine as an example, there are dogs, there are elderly folks that live in this neighborhood. It's a walking, biking, jogging neighborhood. And the argument was made last week, 2 weeks ago, that there's very little traffic impact, especially if there's no exit or entrance on Kings Highway West. I was thinking about this, and I don't know how many cars it takes for a Walgreens to be profitable each day. Is it 500? Is it 1,000? Let's say it's 1,000. How many of those cars are, instead of making a jinky sort of left turn on Post Road to get back to Westport, if that's the way, aren't they going to make a right and hook onto our street? So I don't know if that's 100 cars or 200 cars a day. That's a lot of cars where my kids walk to the bus. It would not be safe, and I wanted to come before the commission to urge you to reject a zone change in this residential neighborhood on the basis of safety, and also on the basis of essentially the basis of what our capitalist system is all about, which is private property, and the expectation when one buys a house, settles in a house, improves a house, which all of our neighbors have done, lives in a residential neighborhood, whether randomly demarcated to begin with or not. People have lived in this neighborhood, this family residential neighborhood, for dozens and dozens and dozens of years. There's an expectation, a gentleman came up and spoke from the public 2 weeks ago, there's an expectation that if it's zoned residential, it's going to stay that way. I mean, I don't see the difference between this proposal and, frankly, putting something like the World Trade Center on the property next to me. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm on a half acre. It's a residential lot. If I tear down my house, rip out the trees, I could probably fit a Walmart there rather than a Walgreens. And I'm partially joking, obviously, and I don't mean to make light of the situation because none of us feel it's light, but I would argue that what I just mentioned as a joke of what I would propose doing is exactly what's being proposed right across the street from where I raise my kids. We don't feel it's safe to have a large commercial business on our residential street, whether or not there's a 6-foot wall and 12-foot evergreens. Couple of comments that have also come up about the mixed use down the street. That property, which is the back of a soccer store right on the edge of Westport that was referred to, was supposed to have, from my understanding and everything we've heard, a wall, thick foliage, and only an emergency exit. Well, guess what happens over time, to Attorney Green's point of encroachment and erosion of the line? It's now a 2-lane entrance exit with double yellow lines. There's no wall. There are bushes around about this high. We stare into the back of a business over there, and that's what's going to happen if you don't toe the line here on our behalf. The character of Southport and Fairfield is at stake. I would just ask you, if you had your home, which I assume many of you own a house, and you looked across the street at 2 houses, and then they were ripped out, and any store of 9,000 square feet, to your point, Commissioner Alessi, which, regardless of the brand, what would you think about living at that house? You wouldn't want to live there. So we urge you to reject the proposal, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Wagner and Fairfield Town Planning and Zoning Commissioners, for allowing me to speak. My name is Dr. Elaine Wong. I live on 48 Aberdeen Way, which is one of the one of the Pequot Landing condos. And I want to just make 3 points. I'm going to have to go a little bit long into my history because I think this is relevant to the 3 points. So I'm pretty old, but I was born in Singapore. I've lived in Hong Kong. My family has property in every place that I've lived. So, I've lived in Montreal. I've lived in Palo Alto, California. I also have a home in Toronto, Canada, and that's my primary residence. When I was choosing a second residence to live in, because I work in Connecticut, I and the rest of my family fell in love with the area. We fell in love because of Southport Harbor, and we fell in love because of the historic feel of Southport, the village aspect of Southport. I appreciated that the banks and the various stores in Southport, or in Westport and Fairfield, did not look like strip malls. And I appreciated the feel of the Southport village. I think this is really important because what has been emphasized today is the historic aspect of Southport Village. I have traveled to many places, as I'm sure you all have, and I have not heard of a single absolute feeling that it was great to rip out what was old, that what was old was not worthwhile. There's always regret in forgetting about the historic aspects of a place. And I would say that in Toronto, for a number of these homes, they would have been recognized as historic homes, and it would not have been allowed. It's a different country, I understand. But I think that my point is that everywhere you go, people look at historic sites and they say we need to reclaim them, to renovate them, and not to rip them down. And once ripped down, we cannot bring them back. So that's my first point, historic aspect. My second point is the issue around zoning. In all the places that I've lived, I have never seen a residential zone, of people living in a residential zone, saying it's okay, and without deep thought, converting it to commercial zone. This is it. Where I live in the Forest Hill area of Toronto, to change a density of house to land, you will have families, blocks coming to contest this. And so the change of residential to commercial cannot be done at a slight, just a slight change in the zoning. Needs to be done very, very thoughtfully, and I believe that you all will make that thoughtful consideration about what you do. I do research in medicine, and I was interested by a couple of facts that were presented here a couple of weeks ago. The first was that there was an assessment that there would not be a significant negative impact on residential value based on 4 pairs of homes. I would never ever, and I would hope that most people would not accept that kind of a description as being generalizable to 4 homes I do not know anything about, and I really would not contend that is evidence against concerns that I would have around potential pricing changes that will happen to the people who live here. And I bought in to a residential neighborhood. The third fact is that around the safety in the area. My husband is a cardiologist, and unlike some physicians, he actually walks the talk. He believes we must run, we must jog, and my 21-year-old and 25-year-old kids who come to visit, when they're here, they do all of the things that Will's younger children do. And they do that on Kings Highway. It's not possible to do that on Post Road. One of the statements that has been made is that there was a traffic survey that was conducted that suggested that there would be no significant increase to any of the traffic that's happening. When something contradicts common sense, you need to think through this again. That's what I'm saying when I'm listening to this. First thing is that we have seen the advantage of Center Street being a one-way street coming out because of safety issues. I now I drive up Center Street in order to turn left to go onto Westport. Currently, because of Kings Highway West, there are people who drive into Kings Highway West, so it's quite a very short distance between a left turn onto Center Street, off of Center Street onto Kings Highway, or onto to the Post Road, and then going into Kings Highway. When a second entrance is put in, subsequent to that, to go into a Walgreens, this staccato traffic is going to cause accidents, as will the increase in traffic that will definitely happen if there is a Walgreens. There will be cars that will come out from Kings Highway, even though the entrance is on Post Road. There'll be people who will be making very acute V-turns, and I am generally a fairly careful driver. When I come in to go home to Pequot Landing, when I have to make that V-shaped turn, I am very worried, as it is, without more traffic, which would be happening when you get a second entrance from a Walgreens coming in and out. So in summary, I make 3 points to you. These have been raised many times before. First is the historic Southport and the importance of that, not just to this area locally, but to Connecticut. I believe this is to Connecticut. Second is the issue of zoning. And third is, frankly, an issue of safety for kids, eventually my grandchildren, I hope. I think that please consider that and please make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Green?
I would next like to call Joanne Muskis.
Hello, my name is Joanne Muskis, and I have been a resident of the town of Fairfield for 31 years. I have property at 30 Southport Place in Southport, which would be right across the street from sunny, scenic Walgreens. We've been speaking about the parcel, including the 4 lots, and my understanding from the meeting 2 weeks ago was that 3 out of the 4 lots were non-commercial. So there would be a request for a zoning change for 75% of this parcel. To me, that seems like a significant amount, and if it's not a commercial property, it should remain as is, and 3 out of the 4 parcels should not be granted this exception. They're also asking for a 15-foot-high Walgreens sign, "Welcome to Fairfield," on a special permit request to the town of Fairfield. I also take exception to this and find it astounding. It is ugly and embarrassing. And we feel that when they spoke with us at a neighbors meeting in Southport this summer, the Walgreens attorneys did not address any safety issue for residents at an already highly dangerous intersection. The traffic study that was presented to us 2 weeks ago, as we all know, did not include the portion down the street where there were 2 deaths that they didn't speak about at all, and had at least 5 accidents that we are all aware of when they called them 3 accidents. There will be a great impact on the neighborhood. There will be children traveling to and from school. There will be children traveling to and from the Wakeman Boys and Girls Club in Southport, which they have done for over 50 years. The commuters, of which I am one, going to the station at Metro North every morning and coming back every night. There is already a significant amount of traffic just in the neighborhood and on the streets, and the regular traffic patterns going to and from work. What that traffic study also did not include is the new traffic that will be resulting from Garlick and Herb's traffic pattern. And I am a CPA by trade, and so when I counted and heard that there will be 46 parking spots at the new proposed Walgreens, and it will be open 14 lovely hours a day and night, I sat and I thought, and I took out my calculator. And I said, well, if I were going to a drugstore, how long would I be in there? 20 minutes? I'm not sure. I guess every one of those 46 spots would not be filled at all times of the 14 hours of the day and partial night. But perhaps they would, and maybe that's why Walgreens intended to make 46 parking spots there. And then I thought about the drive-through window that is proposed to go through 40 feet from my neighbor's bedroom window. And I said to myself, if I were driving through the drive-through, how many cars an hour would I think might make it through the drive-through, and how long would they be there? So I'm not expecting that they would all be there at all times of the 14 hours of the day and part of the night. However, if at least 10 cars went through an hour, which they probably would, and if at least half of that parking spot was filled up, I would figure we would average about 1,500 extra cars a day right across the street, which brings a lot of extra pollution, a lot of extra noise, and let's not forget about good old Garlic and Herbs, our local eatery right next door, which will be bringing its brand new traffic pattern. And one of the people who's familiar with the traffic in the town did suggest that this would push up our percentage and bring our traffic situation in the area from the grade of a C to the grade of a D. We are all worried about the very important safety issues that this brings to bear and the extra 1,500 or 2,000 cars a day of new traffic, to say nothing of the pollution, the garbage, the 20 delivery trucks, depending on what size every week, the recycling, the 4 giant air conditioners, and one woman brought up the potential larceny that it will bring to the neighborhood. So these are all issues that I've been ruminating about for the past 2 and some odd weeks. And then I thought, well, what it really boils down to is the people of Fairfield and the zoning laws of Fairfield and what they stand for. And the zoning laws that I have seen in the past 31 years of living here seem to exist in the town of Fairfield for the protection of the people of the town of Fairfield, whether it's in Southport or Stratfield or North Stratfield, Riverfield, the Old Post Road, or anywhere in Fairfield. The zoning laws exist for a reason. And this parcel is partially zoned residential, light industrial, etc. But there are 3 non-commercial parcels in this package. And there were previously 2 homes here, and there is a good reason that 3/4 of this parcel is non-commercial. It's because it is in a residential neighborhood. And because it's located in a residential neighborhood, I believe it should remain that way. This is a request for a zoning change that should not be taken lightly. We should not be making zoning changes for the benefits of Walgreens or wealthy landowners who have been well calculated in their demise of various houses over the last number of years, nor the ability to have sidewalks paid for by Walgreens or a few more tax dollars for the coffers of the town of Fairfield. There are residences up and down Kings Highway West and off all of the side roads and in all of the neighborhoods abutting it. If the town of Fairfield changes this zoning from residential and light industrial to completely commercial, it would be a unilateral decision creating a significant safety issue of the highest magnitude, and the impact could be deadly to the residents of the area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call Richard White next.
Good evening. My name is Richard White. My wife Susan and I live at 9 Oxford Road. 9 Oxford Road intersects at the north end with Kings Highway West. We live at the corner where our front porch is on Oxford Road. North side of our property is opposite the property that's under discussion. here tonight. This is a unique corner of Fairfield. It's a corner of Southport, which has both historic and scenic interest and value. Historically, a point of note, in July of 1779, the British torched Fairfield, burned down 83 houses, over 100 barns and storage places, 2 churches, the town hall, the courthouse. Following that burning, there were, in this immediate neighborhood that we're talking about, 3 houses which survived. There are 3 houses literally within a stone's throw of the property under discussion here in this section. Today, trees border Oxford Road, along the road which was used in the 1800s to haul onions from a little bit farther north, which were an important part of the local economy, down to Southport Harbor. This is a little bit of the historic interest, but in addition to that, Oxford Road has a great deal of scenic interest and value. Every year, literally thousands and thousands of people pass by in front of our house along Oxford Road, coming up and going down side streets or just out for a walk. Every day of the year, and especially on weekends, families come walking by, people come jogging, running, skating, walking their dogs, as has been indicated before, which makes it a scenic, local gem, if you like, in terms of a place that's enjoyed by a lot of people. A few years ago, Fairfield gave Oxford Road the designation of a scenic road. The Bigelow Tea Community Challenge each year includes Oxford Road in the route that it has for its marathon. And every Thanksgiving, participants from all over Connecticut run by Oxford Road as part of the route for the Pequot Turkey Trot. This scenic part that I'm describing is all to the south of Kings Highway West. At this point, I'd like to interject some personal observations stemming from what I've seen over the years. At the age of 90, I have a certain perspective on some of these things. I'm a veteran of the Second World War. I've lived for a number of years in each Wisconsin, in California, and Massachusetts, lived 15 years in Switzerland, and we have lived for over 40 years in Connecticut. I've lived in a number of places where I've seen how people have regard for their properties, have regard for their neighbors, have regard for their natural environment. I see that in the scenic neighborhood in Southport on the south side of Kings Highway West. Compared to this scenic neighborhood, we've seen a total contrast to the property under consideration tonight. For over 15 years we've lived here, and we've seen a progression of blight and wasteland. When we moved here, we drove along the post road opposite where we live, and were astonished, not to say disgusted, to see the blight there. Broken fences lying on the ground, rubbish, garbage, litter around the bus stop. We couldn't believe it. When I went to town hall, I found that I could not make a blight complaint about anything on property. Blight complaint could only be made about a residence or a building. So it stayed that way, the way we first saw it, stayed that way for years. At that time, when we moved there, the 2 houses which you've heard mentioned tonight and which you've seen in those pictures, those 2 attractive little houses were there on that property. Over a period of time, they became vacated, and then they were simply left to become blight. And eventually, they were demolished. Then, with total disregard for the beauty of the trees on the property, including a sugar maple over 150 years old, all of the trees on the property were cut down. Part of the irony of that was the description in the 2000 master plan of Fairfield, description of Southport as a village with narrow trees and beautiful mature trees. Now, following years of blight, disregard for nature, disregard for the neighborhood, the present proposal is for what many of us in this room consider a capstone of commercial blight. What could be greater antithesis to this neighborhood than the Walgreens proposal with its negative impact on traffic, negative impact on safety, negative impact on sanitation, negative impact on noise, negative impact on light, and negative impact on the appearance and scenic beauty of the neighborhood. It's for very good reason that the Fairfield Master Plan of 2002 stated the following, Roman 2, 3.7, Ray Southport, which Attorney Green mentioned previously as well. Encroachment of commercial zones into residential areas should be discouraged. In the light of these factors, I trust that the TP&Z will be responsive to concerns of the community.
Thank you. Brad Hardy.
Thank you. My name is Brad Hardy. I'm a resident at 397 Greens Farms Road in Westport. We're the second house past the creek, which provides the line that designates the two towns. I'm not going to try to go over anything that's already been covered. I'll restrict my comments to two specific areas this evening. The first one is that for the past 14 years I've been living in that home, I've actually been a neighbor of Walgreens. I live in a home next door to the woman at 401 Greens Farms Road, where we have been neighbors of Walgreens for 14 years. Walgreens is not a good neighbor. Living next to a Walgreens means cleaning up the garbage that flows over the fence or flows under the fence. It means cleaning up the beer bottles and pop cans get tossed over the fence. It means listening to trucks that come in the after hours periods. We're being promised here this evening that that's the kind of thing that won't happen. You can't stop it. We've had situations where at the existing property down the road in Westport, there's a sign there that says that there should be no garbage collection before 8 a.m. in the morning. The garbage trucks routinely come at 4 o'clock or between 2 and 5 in the morning. I've even had occasion to stop and point that out to the garbage trucks that are collecting at the Walgreens location, only to be threatened by the truck driver. So what do? I call Walgreens and ask them for the manager. The manager says, oh no, you have to call corporate. I call corporate. What do you think corporate tells me? They tell me I have to call the manager. So for the past several years we've done this dance. We can't get the garbage trucks to come at any other time other than the time they want, nor can the tenant. It means cleaning up the shopping carts that get tossed into the creek occasionally, being a Walgreens neighbor. It means listening to an air conditioning vent that sits on top of their existing structure that makes a lot of noise and keeps the neighborhood awake. We've called the landlord of the property. The landlord said, well, geez guys, I'd like to help you, but under that lease, that's a Walgreens issue. So we ask him, well, would you speak to Walgreens to see if they would fix it? Yes, I'll speak to Walgreens. We've called him 5 or 6 times, and over the past 5 or 6 years, it's never changed. The air conditioning sits on top of that building and makes noise, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can hear that, and it keeps people awake. So living next to a Walgreens is no picnic. Walgreens just is not a good neighbor. The other comment I'd like to make is with regard to the safety. That's been brought up quite a bit this evening. The traffic study earlier, 2 weeks ago, indicated that there was a reduction in traffic. It's probably because they all drive down Kings Highway and Greens Farms Road. Okay, they said that there's been no accidents. I've had 3 accidents in front of my house in 2 years. We've watched cars drive through stopped bus signs. We had to be so careful with our children that when they saw the bus that we had to make sure that the car that was coming actually physically stopped. We would never permit our children to walk across the road to the bus. In the past 2 years, we've had 3 accidents. The first car drove off the road into the ditch just west to the east of 401 Greens Farms Road. It was easily brought out of there, by a tow truck. The second car in 2:30 in the morning drove off the road, up over my lawn, missing 2 trees, my front step, and my mailbox. I was lucky because the damage only went to the grass and the flower bedding. The next accident, I wasn't so lucky. A car driving 55 miles an hour in a BMW 5 Series with 3 children in it drove into 2 40-foot white pine trees at full speed. The driver and all the occupants luckily were safe. The 2 trees could not be saved. I no longer have a protective barrier now along the traffic that drives along Kings Highway and Greens Farms Road. There's just simply no way of protecting it. I've been a banker for 25 years, and among the clients I've loaned hundreds of millions of dollars to includes Walgreens, CVS, and many other regional drug chains. And the one thing that they did not discuss with you in their presentation is that Walgreens and CVS like standalone drugstores. Why? They generate more traffic. More cars drive to them, more cars drive through them. They are more profitable because they generate more traffic, not less. It is difficult to believe that the traffic study suggests that there will not be a traffic impact. The traffic impact will certainly be there, and they'll be driving down our residential neighborhood. It's only a matter of time until a walker, jogger, or runner is hit by a car that's made a right-hand turn on the post road, a right-hand turn on Kings Highway, and is speeding down Kings Highway or Greens Farms Road at 50 miles an hour. If this zoning change goes through, it's practically a death sentence for some unknown jogger or walker in the or biker in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phyllis Furlong.
Hi, members of the committee. Thank you. My name is Phyllis R. Furlong. I'm a registered nurse. I live with my husband directly across the street from these various parcels of land. And they are still various parcels of land. We looked across the street to heavily wooded lots and couldn't even tell the Boston Post Road was there on the other side. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I'd like to get you my photographs. If you took a picture from either the driveway or my upstairs window, it was a heavily wooded lot with huge trees. You couldn't even tell the Post Road was there. I know you think, oh, we're right on the Post Road, but we're not. Good sir, I know you said you didn't want any duplicative comments, but I feel compelled to speak and say what I need to say. 2 weeks ago, we listened to quite a few arguments that were quite lengthy, so I'd like to continue.
Well, they were part of public comment. See, right now, we're still with Attorney Green, who's representing an association. And that association is comprised of members. But each of the members should not be coming up and giving their duplicative comments seriatim. Attorney Green should call relevant witnesses to the individual subjects that he wants to address. When that is concluded, we will hold it open to public comment, at which time any members of the public are free to give their comments. So I would ask Attorney Green that, you know, the witnesses that you call be sort of geared towards specific subject matter that you'd like to address, and not duplicative arguments that
Okay.
you know, are being made on behalf of the group.
Then the point I do want to make is that from my house
I mean, I don't want to
across the street,
I don't want to detract from anyone's right to speak, and so to the extent that you want to reserve your comment and come up during the regular public comment period, then you're free to do that. But I think that for Attorney Green's purposes, his presentation should be closed-ended. Right? You call your witnesses, you do your thing, you close, other members of the public can come up and speak. And so, to that end, you know, I'm not trying to tell you how to put on your presentation, but I think that's the way it should go.
Oh, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. I understand that. There were just a number of members of the association who wanted to speak in the context of our presentation, and with the understanding that you'll permit them to speak after I conclude, that's fine.
Of course,
I don't
of course.
have-
And if there's
I
something
recognize
specific,
that.
and again, I don't want to turn her away. I don't want to, give her make anyone feel like they're not welcome. And frankly, I feel badly now that she went and sat down. And I'd like her to come back up and do her thing.
I think that Ms. Furlong will be back, Mr. Chairman,
Right.
so we can deal with that.
right.
I would call George Russell as my last speaker within the context of this presentation. And he appears as a member of our association and also, as I'm sure you recognize him from previous applications, the president of the Sasquatch Association.
Thank you.
Good evening. George Russell from the Sasquatch Association. I just wanted to go on record here tonight to say that our Board of Trustees has carefully considered this. We've met with, I've met with the owner. We've held public meetings about this. I've met with the neighbors. And it's the position of the Sasquatch Association that we support the neighbors in the opposition to this proposed zone change. We are against the encroachment of commercial zones into existing residential zones in Southport. We are not, however, against development. But we feel a development should be sensitive to the character of the town that we love. Just on a personal note, I grew up right down the street from this development at 198 Oxford Road, and I chose to purchase a home right next door at 21 Oxford Place because I love the neighborhood. And to suggest that putting this Walgreens here would have no effect on our property values, I feel is ridiculous. Attorney acknowledges that a residence could be built on these residentially zoned properties, but he says, who would want to live there? Frankly, that's an insult to myself and to all my neighbors that live in this area. And we would like to see this property remain zoned residential to act as a buffer for us all against the commercial properties on the Post Road. Thank you.
Does the Sasquatch Association have a position with respect to the industrially zoned parcels?
Not specifically, but that is, I met with Sherry Stenick, and when we talked about this, she said, look, this is not a given. This Walgreens proposal could be denied very easily, What would happen next? She goes, I'll just come up with another plan. So there's a lot of things that could happen on this lot, and any of them are going to have to come before these town boards for whatever it is, variances, approvals. Maybe this just isn't the right plan. Maybe something else could be done. And I know that the neighbors did meet with the first selectman, and that was one of his points was, maybe rather than just fighting against it, why don't you all try to get together and think of something that would be mutually acceptable to everybody? That might be lucrative for the developer, but also sensitive to the neighbors, and I don't think this is it.
Anyone else have any questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Just be sure you give a copy to Attorney Nutt.
Do that.
Thank you.
While some of the speakers were speaking in response to Commissioner Corcoran's question, I did look at the plan, and I am confident, certainly, that a residential structure, a home, could be built on the residential lot to 920, I believe, the residential lot that's more westerly, and I believe that a residential structure could be built on the other lot as well within the setback requirements. So, in accordance with the Zone B residence requirements. So, I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the application, and there are a number of issues that gave cause for concern. I don't know if you have your complete sets of plans with you. I know they're bulky to carry around. But one of the first things that struck me was that the plans seem to be inconsistent. First of all, on page C100, which is the site plan, which you all have a large-scale copy, this excerpt is part of that. And I don't know if any of the board can move back to the hearing, the full scale. Sorry, do you have the site plan on the board? But the first thing you'll note, looking at C100, which is the site plan, is that the applicant seems to suggest in the design that this hatched area on the southerly elevation of the property seems to be what is referred to, it looks like it's a loading zone, and I note that in the drawing I have, C100, that it's got a truck parked in it, and it appears to be some attempt to satisfy the notion of a loading zone. There is no specific space designated as a loading zone pursuant to, as required pursuant to the zoning regulations. But the curious thing is that when you go to the detail at C530, which is another drawing in the packet, which gives detail on part of the structure, you'll note that the applicant purports to put a dumpster enclosure on, it appears to locate the dumpster enclosure on the south side of the structure. That's not shown on the elevation drawings, and it appears to be only on drawing C530, and certainly that would impede the ability, it projects some 10 feet out into, from behind the building at its furthest point, and it appears to be right here on the structure. It's not shown on the site plan, it's only shown in detail, so presumably the dumpster enclosure is there. I don't see it located anywhere else on the site.
No,
So-
and I mean, the road purportedly on C530, there's a 15-foot wide roadway which couldn't possibly exist
Correct.
in the map on C100.
Correct. So I would suggest, first of all, that there is no designated loading zone, no designated loading space as required pursuant to.
What would be your position on having a loading zone that would actually be also like a dual purpose? In other words,
I don't believe that's permitted under our
you know,
regulations.
if C100 was actually to be the plan where the loading zone was also on the drive, you know, the vehicle flow area, that...
I think that would impede, assuming, as the applicant said, that they comply with the notion of delivering between 9 and, I didn't get the exact hours.
Yeah, it was 8 and, they did.
Then a 30-foot truck would certainly impede the flow of traffic. You have a drive-through window, which I know is an attractive amenity and something that Walgreens and other stores really like to have because it does draw traffic, as one of the speakers said.
Yeah,
But,
well, I actually noticed that in the presentation. I was forgot to ask about that, because the loading zone that's hatched also includes the area that is the drive-through window.
That is correct.
So-
And, well, the drive-through window is actually on the west side of the structure, but you can see that there's purportedly a 15-foot aisle and a 9-foot aisle that I suppose, I'm going to get into this momentarily, but the fact of the matter is, and I'll get to it, there is a requirement under our parking regulations that driveways have to be 12 feet wide. A one-way aisle with no parking must be 12 feet in width, and certainly that is not accomplished on the south side of the structure by virtue of that loading zone.
Well, it would be if C530 is the plan.
If C530 is the plan, then there's no loading area.
Right.
But there's a driveway.
Right.
So that's a problem.
And presumably that's the only loading area that's identified anywhere on the plan? I didn't look.
There's no designated loading zone pursuant to, as required. Section 28.5 of the regulations requires one loading zone shall be not less than 12 feet by 30 feet with a vertical clearance of 15 feet with such shape, access, and slope as to accommodate one truck having an overall length of 30 feet. And ordinarily, it's been my experience that plans before the commission show an actual space that is designated as a loading zone. That this crosshatched area is called loading. I know, looking once again on C100, but if that is indeed the loading, then I would suggest that the driveway then is inadequate. So I would like to, I have some sections of the regulations that I'd like to share with the commission. The first section is section 12.7.6.4, which is in the design commercial district, in the design district regulations.
I had, not to interrupt you, but I had anticipated taking a few-minute break for restroom access at about 9:30. What's your take on what you're intending to do, and do you want to take a break and then start up again?
Yeah, I think that would be good, and I can distribute documents to the commission and during the break.
And get organized and
Sure.
then come back? Is
Sure.
that-
That'd
All
be
right.
great.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Call the meeting back to order. If everyone could please take their seats. So we're about 9:40, just about 9:45. We do have a curfew at 11 o'clock. It is my extreme hope that we will finish this hearing this evening. And with everyone's cooperation, I think we have a really good chance of doing that. So without further ado, Attorney Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to move through these various issues quickly. Among the documents, and unfortunately I think you probably got them in reverse order, but I'll take them one by one. The first, one of the first documents I produced is a drawing that looks like this, that shows red and green boundaries and just a red boundary. Well, it shows only a red boundary on the southern portion of the property. And just to begin at the beginning, the red boundary that I'm showing here on the southerly portion of the property, the red area depicts a 12-foot driveway. And I've also provided the commission with a copy of section 28.11.2.4, which once again establishes as a standard that a one-way aisle with no parking shall be no less than 12 feet in width. So that...
Before we broke, you mentioned 12.7.6.4?
Yes.
Are you going to get to that, or did you...
That's next.
That's okay.
So the other, I had provided the commission with a copy of 12.7.6.4 amongst, is probably one of the...
Are you finished with this, then?
We'll get back to that momentarily. So 12.7.6.4 is once again for design districts, and it says that adjacent residence district boundary, it says setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement, whichever is greater. And that is significant in this case because I've also provided you with a copy of the zoning map, and this application presents a very interesting issue. And the interesting issue is that in its application for a zone change, the applicant described the property boundaries and provided meets and bounds descriptions of the various properties. They then produced a zone change map, and if I could borrow the applicant's exhibit here that they presented to the commission. The issue that is interesting with this application is that the applicant specifically designated the meets and bounds of the actual properties involved for the zone change. The zone is described in our zone map, however, as being the center line of Kings Highway West. So there's an issue for the commission as to what is actually being rezoned. I actually had a conversation with Mr. Wendt, who suggested that the zone change goes through to the center line, was his suggestion. However, I note that the application and everything that was submitted to our neighboring towns, everything that was posted, merely uses the meets and bounds of the properties.
Well, that's the way it certainly has been described in all the drawings.
Yes, and consistent with that, this says zones to be changed to designated commercial, and it leaves a sliver of Residence B in Kings Highway West,
Right,
based on the description.
Now, the design commercial, lot 209, doesn't go to the center line either.
Correct.
Do you think that's an error, or do you think that that's intentional?
Yeah, that's only got like a quarter of Kings Highway West. I don't know. I don't know whether the zoning map was drawn that way. Presumably it was, but I don't know that. But this is what the applicant designated in this exhibit and in all of their documents as the zones to be changed.
Why is that significant?
Well, it's significant because 12.7.6.4, which I referenced, once again says, setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement. So the adjacent residence district, depending on how the commission interprets the zone change, is either Residence B or Residence A. Now, here's the
because Residence B would continue along that half of Kings Highway West?
For possibly.
And
I leave that to the commission.
Such that the Residence B post-zoning would look like the Big Dipper upside down?
Something like that.
Would be the handle?
Yes. Now, let's take it a step further. The requirements for setbacks are different in Residence A and Residence B. And so the first, if you go to the back of 12.7.6.4, it's a two-sided document that I've provided you. And so it says it's landscaping, and it suggests that the area required for a minimum setback from any residence district boundary line, I'm leaving out some of the verbiage, but basically it says the area required for a minimum setback from any residence district boundary line or use permitted in these zones shall be provided with a buffer consisting of fences, walls, or embankments in combination with other landscaping in such a manner as to screen the view to a height of 5 feet at such boundary line, or shall be provided with evergreen shrubs. The reason I gave you the drawing with the green stripe is, first of all, on this drawing which I've provided, which only has the green stripe on the western boundary, there is no question that this property on the western boundary is Zone B. And there's no question that the setback on that is, in fact, 10 feet. And so we would suggest, based on 12.6.4, and that language is actually echoed in the special permit standards, that a 10-foot buffer needed to be provided between the B residence zone and the proposed use on the property. So I'm referring to pages, there's a two-sided document that I provided you, pages 52 and page 54 of the zoning regulations.
Yeah, my 54 only has one side.
Well, I'll give you mine.
Yeah, thank you, this is different.
Where are you pointing to now?
12.6.4. And it says in that second sentence, the area required for a minimum setback from any residence district boundary line or use permitted in these zones shall be provided with a buffer. And I would suggest that the buffer required under 12.7.6.4 on the other side is 10 feet, because that is the setback from an adjacent residence district boundary for properties in the design commercial zone. So, a further extension of that then is not only did there need to be a 10-foot planted buffer or fenced buffer area to the west, but the next extension would be that if the commission finds that the southerly boundary of the property, that if the southerly boundary of the property is in fact the property line, so in other words, the southerly boundary of the site that is proposed to be rezoned is Zone B.
Yeah, use your microphone.
Then we would suggest that there needs to be a boundary on the southerly portion of the property as well.
Would the same be true if it was Residence A?
Okay, so Residence A presents a different scenario. And if it is Residence A, so in other words, if the commission interprets the zoning delineation, the line to be the center of the road, if the commission were to find that by designating the properties, by implication, the zone is changed to the middle of the road, that creates a different scenario. And the scenario that creates is, and I'm referring to pages 22 and 23 of the zoning regulations, which I've provided you with. So clearly, if the zone is interpreted to be the center of the road, then the property bounds, then the proposed design commercial district would bound on a Zone A, Residence Zone A.
It would be bound by Zone B on the west and Zone A on the south.
That is correct. And that language that I'd cited to you from the zoning regulations, once again, says setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement.
Right.
Now, we know that on the south side of the property, it is a street line setback, because as the applicant established in their application, there are really two street lines presented in this application. There is no rear property line under our zoning regulations, because of the way street line is defined. There's no rear property line under the standards of our zoning regulations. There's two street lines.
Street lines and there's side lines.
Correct. So even though there's no access on Kings Highway West, it still acts as a street line. And there's a street line setback requirement, and I provided you with Section 5.2.4 as to setbacks. And in the Residence A district, the required street line setback for Residence A is 30 feet. And the 30 feet is measured from the street line, and the street line is described in the zoning regulations as street line is the right-of-way easement or taking line of any public or private street or any easement of access or private right-of-way 25 feet or more in width. And clearly, Kings Highway West is a street. The street line would be basically it would be measured from the southerly boundary of the subject property where it meets the right-of-way. And on that basis, the application would be non-conforming, because the 30 feet setback created would demonstrate that the building encroaches within the street line setback for Residence District A, and therefore the plan is non-compliant in that context as well. So either way, whether the commission finds that there's a slice of B remaining in the road, or
This
not.
is a slice of B remaining in the road.
That's a slice of B remaining in the road.
And why is this problematic?
Because, once again, the boundary line would be B. The buffer area, the area for the residence district boundary is 10 feet, which should be a landscape buffer. Therefore, the driveway would be pushed that much further towards the building, which further aggravates the access, so there is
It
no...
further aggravates the access, but the red band here simply encroaches upon a concrete curb, doesn't encroach on the building.
It doesn't, but there's no loading zone at all. And the way the applicant has described this property, there's apparently some, as I understand it, and I've looked at some of these sites, the structures you're seeing on the southerly side of the property is, first of all, some kind of an enclosure for the, I think it's the carts that come in with product in them. They're like rolling carts, and they store them in that shed, and you can see those doors swing open. And also, although it's not shown on this drawing, there's a big dumpster enclosure. So basically, the dumpster enclosure would, I think, project almost into the, or might project actually into the driveway. And so there's, once again, no clearance. Also, as you can see, the second driveway on the west side of the property would not be conforming. There's one 12-foot driveway, so if someone was stopped at the drive-through, another vehicle couldn't go through.
Is it your view that no driveway can be within the setback area that you've marked as red?
That we've marked as green?
That you've marked as red?
That no driveway?
Driveway.
No, that is the driveway. The red is actually the driveway.
That's what I'm saying. So why, I still don't understand why, if both borders are Residence B, why the southerly portion is problematic.
Because there's no loading zone at all.
The loading zone, right? Because you can't have a loading zone within the setback?
Because you can't have a loading zone within the setback, and because there's the disparity in the two drawings where the dumpster enclosure is as
Right,
practical.
we're certainly going to have to get clarification on that, there's no doubt. But I just want to make sure that I understand the argument precisely, that so on the western side, if Residence B, which it is, and there's really not any debate about that, even post-zone change, we have a buffer area.
Yes.
And then a setback.
Right.
And currently proposed in that setback is a roadway. Are you arguing that that is problematic at all under the Residence B setback?
Yes.
Why?
Because there are two driveways there, and one of them is 12 feet, and one of them is only 7 feet, so it violates you can't have two driveways. You can't have a 7-foot driveway.
Why do they need two? Why can't it be a one-way access?
Because if they're going to have a drive-through window on the west side of the property, then arguably a car stop would, I guess they could, but it would stop all traffic.
Well, it would. I mean, but is there any restriction on them having a one-way traffic roadway around the building to circulate?
There's not a restriction on that, but there would not be a loading space on the back of the building, and if a truck came between 9 and 5...
That's the southerly portion.
Correct.
We're just focused on the westerly portion right now.
Well, they've proposed two driveways.
I know that as it currently stands. I'm just taking it one logical step further. Is there a restriction on having a roadway within the setback?
Within the 10-foot setback?
Yeah.
I would argue yes.
Okay, so they are, okay, so that's the problem on that. And then on the southerly side?
There's no loading zone, and there's no room to accommodate a loading zone. And the loading area which is shown is encroached upon under any circumstances.
Good question.
Yeah, why is the setback only 10 feet on the westerly side of the property?
Well, I would, first of all, the regulation talks in terms of 10 feet at least, or whatever the requirement is in the adjacent
Right, the requirement in the adjacent zone is more than 10, it's 20.
Yeah, 20.
That's a side yard? Oh, well, I didn't get orange, the thing, okay. I see.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. I understand now. I'm looking at the document you handed out, Mr. Green.
Right.
And you were referring to 30 over here, so I was looking at 20. I
I'm
said,
sorry.
Why is it 10 inches and 20?
Right.
But Mr. Webb pointed out that it's a side yard.
Right.
So it's 5.
Right.
So it's really 10.
Right, so it's the lesser of, I'm sorry.
It's the greater
of.
Greater of
Correct.
10.
Correct.
Thank you, I understand.
Right, I see that now. Okay, thank you.
So under either case, the building as it's proposed right now does not meet the standards contained in the regulations. So referring to section 25.7, are the requirements for approval, and once again, this all hinges on the notion of the zone change, but certainly compliance with all the standards of the zoning regulations are implicit in section 25.7. And I would also submit that once again, 25.7.6 once again speaks to the setback and buffer requirement from a residential district. I think you've heard and you'll hear from another number of members of our association that the proposed plan does not in fact harmonize with the neighborhood. This is once again a historic neighborhood, as you heard from everyone. I would suggest that the Commission can't reasonably find that this accomplishes a transition in character between areas of unlike character, because really this is plainly a fully commercial use that borders plainly and closely to a residential district. I think, as I pointed out, I measured some 40 feet between the house and the drive-through window, the house on the adjacent property to the west. I don't think that a fence or some shrubs can once again shield that, and it really does not accomplish any transition in character. I understand Mr. Alessi's comment, and I was struck by the notion that he made reference to the hookah lounge, and do you want a hookah lounge on the property?
That wasn't my point.
Okay.
My point is that that parcel is zoned commercial from Kings Highway to the Post Road.
Correct.
And if we leave the zoning map as it is, there's a possibility that we could have something like that with a driveway on the Kings West for a commercial property.
Right.
That was my concern.
Right, I appreciate that, and I understand that, but I think that the converse, or another way of looking at that, is when you grant a zone change, all it does is move the specter of an unpleasant use closer to where so many of these people live, and that's, I understand.
I think, yeah, you've clarified, and so have you.
Thank
I think that point is well made.
Certainly, the way that the the way that the owner has left this property, there might be an argument made that it improves on some basis because there's something planted on the site. There is a thin argument, I think, that could be made that it improves on some basis the appearance of this property, which is really kind of a blighted open lot at this point. But once again, I think as a matter of policy, that's not something that I don't think that that's the kind of conduct or the kind of treatment of property that this commission should adopt, and I really think this commission should think in terms of the highest and best use of properties. There are 2 residential sites. I think by and large people take great pride in their properties in Fairfield and take good care of their properties, and it's something I think that people do, they're happy to do, and something that's expected. And if 2 homes were built on those 2 sites, then certainly I think that that would create a greater sense of beauty and preserve the neighborhood, as you've heard so many of the speakers that have already appeared suggest. The traffic congestion issue, obviously the applicant has eliminated the entrance on Kings Highway West, but as you can As you've heard, there are significant concerns about traffic impact, and I suppose that any development of this site may, and I'm sure that Mr. Nuff's going to get up and say that if any development of this site on the front on the post road will have some impact on traffic. And it's unrealistic to expect that there won't be some development at some point, but I think to minimize that impact, it would be prudent not to rezone the residential half of the property. So, and once again, we would just suggest that the plan does not meet the special permit standards, and I think there's ample basis for the commission to deny it, and that the special permit should be denied. In terms of going once again to the zone change, you've already heard quite a bit, and I don't want to go back over what many of the speakers had offered within our presentation, but at the end of the day, I would like you to think from a planning standpoint of the impact of this property on the applicant, on the owner, and on the residents, and I think you should balance that, and indeed on the town as a whole. I would suggest that it is a policy that's in the master plan, and it is a desire to preserve and protect residential neighborhoods, particularly one which we know, and as you've learned, is so historic and significant. Any further erosion, I think, would be devastating to this neighborhood. So what's the worst case for all involved? The worst case for the applicant is that they will find another site, worst case, and they're very good at it. They have 6,000 stores. And if this particular site doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. The worst case for the owner is that they find a new tenant, potentially, or a new user, or they sell the property, or they find a more compatible use that doesn't create the conditions that are of such concern to my clients. But for my clients are at the greatest risk. This is, once again, as you heard every speaker get up and say, this is where they live. This is where they live, and they are the ones who have the greatest risk in this game with respect to a zone change. And while I understand, and I think the Commission has expressed some very valid concerns regarding the industrial portions on the front of the site, and I get that, and maybe that is some correction that could come out of this application and should come out of this application so we can make some progress in terms of the goal of unifying these districts. I would suggest that all of the other equities, all of the other concerns really are ones that should really cause this commission to decline to exercise the jurisdiction and discretion that you have in creating zones and adjusting zone boundaries. And once again, this is a property, these properties were in one ownership in 377 years ago. Clearly there's been, as Judge Radcliffe found, this is the last remaining property across the street. But I think this is the time to hold the line and to deny this particular zone change and to preserve the residential character of this neighborhood. I don't know if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Green. Does any member of the public wish to be heard? Please. I just ask that, you know, if you have spoken on behalf of the applicant, that there's really no cause or need for you to speak again. I'd ask that keep your comments focused. We have heard many arguments, and if you're represented by counsel and a member of a group, please do not feel compelled to come up and restate again what has been argued on your behalf and what you've paid Mr. Attorney Green to do. Bearing all that in mind, please.
My name is Peter A. Penzer.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm a resident of Fairfield, a longtime resident of Fairfield. I'm the chairman of the town's Economic Development Commission. I happen to be of counsel to Mr. Green's firm. I've had absolutely no involvement in this matter with him or his firm.
And are you speaking on behalf of the Office of Economic
I'm
Development?
speaking on behalf of the Commission, the Economic Development Commission, and I'm speaking in that capacity as this chairman.
Thank you.
The Economic Development Commission did have a presentation by the applicant of the prospective project. We do look at projects from a different perspective than you do. Our viewpoint is to enhance the business opportunity and development in Fairfield, and collaterally its commercial tax base. And we did listen to and talk about the project, including the development of a screening in the back and cutting off from Kings Highway West. And we did find unanimously that, Commission did find unanimously that the development was a reasonable and appropriate use of the property from our viewpoint. And we consequently encourage you to approve the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Marziati, and I live at 921 Kings Highway West. And I'm speaking from a slightly different perspective than people who spoke earlier, because I've only lived there for about 14 months. I bought my house very recently, and I bought my house. My neighbor Rich bought his house within the past year. Will, who spoke earlier, also bought his house within the past 12, 14 months. And then down on Oxford Road, you have Megan and Nick, who also bought very recently. When all of us bought our houses, we were told by the realtors that those lots were residential lots. And that's why we decided to purchase the homes that we did. When my husband and I looked in 921 Kings Highway West, we could have moved a lot of places. We moved from New Canaan, and we rented on Harbor Road, and we fell in love with Southport. We loved it. And so that's why we limited our search to Southport, because we loved the nature of Southport. And we were told that that was a residential lot across the street, and that nothing could be built there but houses. When you have a capricious change in the zoning laws, it really erodes the confidence of your property owners, and people will not want to invest in Fairfield because they will feel as if the rug can be pulled from underneath their feet. The zoning laws are there to protect individuals. When Sherry Stanek bought her property, she knew that those were residential lots. So she felt that if she couldn't develop the pieces that were on the post road, why the heck did she buy them? She knew that they were that size. She knew that they were residential lots behind there. In the opinion of my neighborhood, she let those properties go to seed so that she could claim that they were blighted, and now they have to be restored. Magically, Walgreens is coming to save us. Walgreens is not coming to save us. We were told when we bought our houses that those were residential lots and nothing else could be put there. It really, really destroys the confidence in the government when there are capricious changes to the zoning laws. People will not want to purchase in this neighborhood if that's what goes on at the TPZ. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before, my name is Peggy Brenton, and I live at 55 Oxford Road. I'm going to distribute some information. I have lived on these historic crossroads, Kings Highway West and Oxford Road, for 52 years. For a little, as I mentioned earlier, my late husband and I rented the house, ironically, that's set on the property that's under discussion tonight. In the spring of '65, we purchased the historic John Osborne Saltbox House at 55 Oxford Road, which was built in 1702 and raised our 3 children there. The house sits right around the corner from Kings Highway West, and I still reside there by myself. It also sits on the National Historic Registry that was mentioned earlier in this, as one of the 3 houses in town. It has always been a very tight-knit, caring, and friendly neighborhood. I go on record as being totally opposed to any change of zone from its current residential status and allowing any encroachment of commercial use on this very significant historic road. I'd like to point out some historic features of the area, and especially about Kings Highway West. And I've distributed copies of the packet, the Southport packet, to commissioners, details some of the historic points. These packets were published by the Southport Conservancy from January 1987 to May 2011. I have blacked out 3 paragraphs in red that are particularly pertinent to the importance of maintaining this street as it historically has been, and I want to read them for the record. On page 3, map 2 gives an idea of the scene. Originally, there was an Indian trail going west from Fairfield through Southport. It ran below Mill Hill, skirted Pequot Swamp on the north, and proceeded on across Saskro River. In the 1660s, when the town made grants in Saskwafield, settlers took over the trail in order to get to their grant lands. At some point, they began to turn the path into a road. We know the thoroughfare was in place by 1672 because in that year the colonial government in New York mandated monthly mail service from New York to Boston via this road. In 1679, in honor of Charles II, the road was dubbed the King's Highway. And that's the road that we are asking that you preserve as it was. That was the original Ben Franklin mail route from New York to Boston. And that was Kings Highway West. And then, although the port aspect of the village did become paramount later, Southport was first mostly settled along Kings Highway. And then on page 5, the picture up in the right-hand corner, top corner, the Franklin milestone. This stone once stood in front of the John Osborne II house, which is my current house that was at that location, on Kings Highway, probably moved when the house was moved in 1949. It now stands in front of 845 Kings Highway West. Postmaster Benjamin Franklin rode over rough trails in his own coach, accompanied by a gang of men who dropped stones a mile apart along the entire route, the Kings Highway, to mark the road. Measurements being made by a device attached to the wheel of the coach. And this, if this is not the Franklin stone, it should be. And that's, I'd like to, conclude leaving you with that information. And I ask you, shouldn't this historic integrity of this road be preserved for future generations? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Members of the Commission, I'm Alan Nair. I live on Fleming Lane on the Hill. My connection with this property is that I drive by it every day on my way to the gym in Southport, and then I go to my office by the Stop and Shop. So I am probably one of those people who you've complained about with the traffic on Kings Highway West. It's a lovely neighborhood, and I've watched it get better over the years. That is not my concern. The concern is that I think the problem began in 1957 when they opened a road called the Connecticut Turnpike. And that road changed everything in Fairfield, as it did in many other towns throughout New England. Now we have a slice of that neighborhood abutting Route 1 and a very nice neighborhood that we've heard citizens talk about at length tonight. But my question really is, having looked at the plans and driven by the property as has been for the past several years, is what is going to be better. I haven't heard yet any discussion about what will happen if this proposal is rejected. And I'm not sure that there has been any thought given to what would happen if we have sequential applications and sequential turndowns. I just don't know what better use can be made of the property. The neighbors are rightfully concerned about traffic, but Kings Highway West will not be accessible from this property. And I do not know what better use can be made of the property. Perhaps a condominium, affordable housing, 35 units, 50 units will be in there. But at what point will that be decided? And at what point will there be an improvement to the property, especially with Garelic and herbs going in? So that's a question that I'm glad I don't have to decide. But it's a thought that has been with me since I've heard of the discussions going on tonight. I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Malcolm Rowe. I'm a professional licensed engineer, state of Connecticut. I am against this proposed development, and I would like to focus on the impact of traffic if this proposal goes forward. We've heard a lot about the impact on Kings Highway West, but nothing has been said about Hulls Highway. I live one block north of the proposed Walgreens development on Arbor Drive, which is just off Hulls Highway. There will have to be traffic signalization, I understand, in order for this proposal to go ahead. And that
Sir,
will...
I'm sorry, it just sounds familiar. Did you not say the same thing at the September 9th hearing?
The same thing with a different focus. Is it okay to speak a second time?
Well, not really.
You did say it was open to the public, and I'm a member of the public.
It is, and as a general matter, the public hearing is for you to come up, you say your piece, and we move on.
Okay, thank you.
Because, hold on, and this is just as a general comment. I mean, because if we allowed everyone to simply continue to come back up, oh, I thought of something, we would be here for a long, long time. And there's really, so keep your comments focused and...
I am, thank you. Thank you for that.
Move on.
My primary thought right now is how would traffic flow south on Hulls Highway, turning onto Post Road with traffic signalization, which will cause a backup in traffic up Hulls Highway, which will make it very difficult for people from the 5-story or 6-story office building to the east of Hulls Highway and Quincy Apartments and also Arbor Drive and Mill Hill Terrace. How would the traffic turn onto Hulls Highway? It's going to be very difficult because of the backup that this proposal will create. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rich Pinto. We've talked about my house a lot tonight. It's 909 Kings Highway West. I've dedicated a lot of energy into restoring this home. As we know, it's the oldest home in Fairfield. It's a historic site. It was already around 100 years during the time of the Revolution. Founding fathers have literally walked through that front door. And now when you look out that front door, there's going to be a Walgreens. It's not going to be a residence. I find that it's kind of saddening because the best way to preserve these homes is not through the historic register and things like that. It's getting people like myself that are interested in restoring them just for the love of the neighborhood, for the love of the home. And that's something that's lost as these things encroach into residential spaces. So, just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else have any comments? Yep, feel free to use the easel. Yep.
And before I start, I would like to spread something that was written by a child from our neighborhood.
You can just give us this, we'll take one and pass it. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Larissa Rowe, and I live on Arbor Drive. It's a little bit different neighborhood that was discussed all the time. I am living just across the proposed area, and if the Walgreens is going to be built, I'm going to see this Walgreens from my windows, from my bedroom here. It's very, very close. It's almost like in my backyard. Also, I live on another side of Post Road. So I'm here to object zone changing from residential to commercial in this discussed area. I've been living on Arbor Drive for the last 15 years. I just want to bring my expertise here. I hold PhD in biology, and I'm a professor of biology and microbiology at Housatonic Community College and University of Bridgeport. And I'm here to talk about something that was not discussed yet. I'm going to talk about environmental impact this change is going to bring. The location of our neighborhood is very specific. Due to the negative elevation, we're kind of located in a big hole. This hole is surrounded by this Buckley Pond. Plus we have, that works as a screen to, I'll explain you later why it's important to know that. We have Post Road, we have I-95, and everybody knows I-95 is the busiest road in our country. Post Road is also one of the busiest roads. So we have these two major roads, plus we have local traffic and traffic lights with idling vehicles that create very high concentration of emission gases in our area. Excuse me. What makes things even worse, we have this lower atmospheric pressure and dominating winds coming from Long Island Sound and from Buckley Pond. So the winds are coming this way. We have two huge contaminating our area roads like I-95 and Post Road. So what happens here? All this pollution, because of the predominating winds and of the hole where our streets are located, are tending to stand here in a hole, and that's what we are breathing. I tried to find some data on concentration of emission gases in this area. I could not find anything, but if you live in Fairfield County, according to Clean Air Trust, your air you breathe may put you to the health risk. So here we have some grades for the air in Fairfield County, general Fairfield County. Ozone level, F, failed. Particle pollution, C. And these grades, F and C, are for the air given for the whole Fairfield County. You can imagine how bad this air, if you have air for the whole county, how bad the air is for people who live here in this area. Any commercial development will make it much worse. So let's see what we breathe here, but remember that children are at particular risk. They tend to be more active, breathe faster, and expose their lungs to more pollutants. These two main pollutants, ozone and particulate matter, are the most dangerous. They can increase risk of heart disease, birth defect. They cause eye irritation, headache, bladder, breast, lung cancer, and asthma attacks, and can interfere with the growth and work of the lungs. Children face special risks from air pollution because their lungs are growing and because they are so active. We have more than 50 kids here on Arbor Terrace and Arbor Drive neighborhood. Almost all of them have some consequences of constant exposure to polluted air. Traffic air pollution causes allergies. Almost every child in my area has some conditions associated with air pollution: allergy, eczema, asthma. But this contaminated air affects not only the most sensitive population, children, but adults too. Just take a look at my family. Before I moved here, I didn't have any allergies. I didn't heard about allergies. Now I suffer a lot of allergies to many things. And unfortunately, my whole family suffers as well. But my son took the biggest toll. His respiratory conditions became so severe, he hardly could breathe. He is taking a long-term treatment now. Hopefully, it will help. And on some buildings some houses in our area, we have signs on the door. Danger, oxygen is in use. Seniors in these homes have cancer, lung cancer. We have 2 houses with similar signs on the doors. Used to be more, but other seniors with lung conditions died, so we have only 2 left. And Walgreens will make health of already sick people in our area even worse. My neighbors across the street lost their child who was born with spina bifida several years ago. He was 5 and never was able to walk or talk. What a tragedy. Also, we have a child with a Down syndrome as well in our street. Increasing traffic in our area will make more cases like this. Traffic pollution causes cancer. There are approximately 15...
I'm sorry. Do you have... How much longer do you think you have?
3 minutes?
Okay.
My question is why we never
But many of your comments are not germane to the issues before us. I'm sorry.
The issue is when we do rezoning, we are going to increase traffic. Increasing traffic is going to create pollutions. Pollutions are going to create even worse health situation in our area that is already bad. And it's not only people are suffering. We tested water in this pond. Only things that can survive in extremely contaminated water are living there. If we increase traffic, nothing is going to survive in that lake. Not talking about people and not talking about plants that are already dying in our street. We heard that Walgreens is going to plant more plants. Good luck with that, because our local plants are dying. And I have pictures. Unfortunately, I'm trying to save time. I don't show those pictures of dying trees that are supposed to be resistant to environmental pollutions, but even those trees are dying in our street. And I think this topic is very, very important, and I don't know why we did not discuss it, because increasing traffic in this extremely polluted area is a crime. And if it was your child who was suffering cancer or other conditions created by contaminated air. If you believe it's not relevant, I just have to stop at this point, but I hope I made very serious point and you will take it into consideration. Excuse me, I'm very nervous because it's very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard?
He spoke to you.
I have a lot more different things to say, however. I did request permission.
No, please, come up and...
Hi, I didn't speak yet. I was a resident in Southport at 500 Kings Highway West up until December. I was happy when I left because 2 weeks before I moved, there was an armed robbery at the Shell station. No one wants to mention that. No one wants to talk about traffic. I was worried for my children because we were watching a Disney movie that night when this happened, a few feet away. I remember too, because I was brought up in this town, it's like deja vu when the Fairfield store was going to go to a bigger commercial property and becomes 2 stories. And everyone was up in arms about that. Well, no one has a problem selling their homes off the post road. We need to gentrify this area. We need to get rid of the crime. We need to make this beautiful. I'm happy to see that the total look is expanding and flourishing in this economy. I am happy to see that Paula is doing well with Garlic and Herbs. And Sherry Stenick was in charge of economic development during the construction of what is now a vibrant area in our downtown that was once the Fairfield store. And now she wants to do something that will benefit this town again. For those people that did not get the information they wanted about commercial property, you're living in a commercial neighborhood. It's commercial, okay? If you were not happy with what your realtor said, then go down to town hall and look at it. You had the right. Buyer beware.
Address your comments, please, to the commission.
Okay.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, there have been a lot of comments, a lot of talk, a lot of speakers. No one interrupted you when you were speaking, except for me to say, you've heard this several times, okay? And I hope you come back up to the podium and say what you wanted to say. Please address your comments to the commission.
So
Part of the reason they're reacting
the fact of the matter is
because
this area
you're addressing
needs
it
to
at
be
them.
improved. It is not, the way it is right now, it is deteriorating. And it will continue to deteriorate until some type of economic development is brought to this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Hi there.
Hello, my name is Megan George and I reside at 10 Oxford Road. My husband and I recently purchased our first home last summer in June of 2013. We chose Southport Fairfield, the town, because of its charm and its character. The town itself has so much to offer its residents. When we were driven through the town of Southport by our real estate agent, we didn't realize how beautiful and quaint it was. When I actually saw the listing of our house online, I said, no, that's not for us. But once our real estate agent drove us through the town and drove us down Oxford Road in Kings Highway West, we saw that there was old charm and new charm. New homes were being built, old homes were being bought and taken care of. It doesn't need improvement. It doesn't need a Walgreens. We are tax-paying residents who take care of our properties. My husband and I want to start a family. I have visions just like everybody else in here. We work hard every day to put a roof over our home. We do not want a Walgreens in our neighborhood. Post Road is a commercial street. Kings Highway West and Oxford Road is not. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm cutting it down greatly, but it was said 2 weeks ago that they were trying to put sidewalks in, and really, who's going to walk on the post road? If anybody's going to walk, it's Kings Highway West, Oxford Road, the residential area. Someone was hit by a car on Post Road and killed last summer across from the President Walgreens. But who's going to walk there? I'll tell you who. The homeless and the drug addicts and the psych patients who live a half a mile away in a long-term care facility. 0.6 miles away. But nursing homes are not just for old folks anymore. And as our society deteriorates, we see people in their 40s and 50s in these places. And of course, the government just keeps cutting Medicare and Medicaid and makes it harder to house them, but that's a different story. But there's a struggle to keep them out of the local liquor store, the local Sunoco station to buy cigarettes. And, you know, charming, but they closed Fairfield Hills. And it's a constant battle, and they'll be sneaking down to Walgreens too. So regardless, the landowner wants to make money and the homeowners want to preserve their property values. And all I want to say is really our realtor said from day one, this is not going to help your property values. I mean, what about the little guy who struggles to work and achieve the American dream of home ownership, who works instead of going out on the dole and having the government put a roof over their heads and pay for every other thing imaginable? I mean, is this how we're rewarded? I mean, and what are we teaching our children? That it's okay to break the rules for the sake of money? Because the root cause of the proposed zone change is money. I mean, I could have made a fortune any other number of ways, but I did the right thing. I mean, I was raised better than that. And my husband, who's a direct descendant of George Hull, simply says it's a residential neighborhood and we don't want it rezoned.
Thank you very much. Sir?
I'll spare you guys.
No, please.
Thank you very much for your indulgence. My name is Roger Van Voorhees, and I mentioned walkability last time, and I'm not going to be long this time as I wasn't last. I live 100 yards of Route 1, 100 yards of the Old Post Road and Oldfield Road in Fairfield. I walk everywhere. Walk to Rite Aid, eat at Centros, post office, you name it. People are craving to live in that area, move from the hinterlands. It's a demographic trend. Property values are increasing by virtue of the walkability factor. Route 1 is a transportation and services thoroughfare beholden to this clientele, us. Tonight at this meeting, many of us have been to meetings like this, meetings where the nuance that needs to be aired out, meetings where we seek as much as possible to stick to code while at the same time not sticking it to ourselves by ignoring a better, more creative deal. More often than not, we're faced with requests for variances which, if provided, increase our housing stock, increase the number of boots on the ground, increase local cars on the road, increase kids in need of education and seats in schools. We're protective against residential max-out artists who seek to bend the rules for personal gain. We know the long-term effects of increased housing stock. It haunts us every June when the new mill rate is announced. And yet tonight we have before us a proposed development that seeks to do the very opposite. A development that proposes to convert the use of two properties away from residential into a well-designed neighborhood amenity with higher real property value, a value that upon appraisal will have exponentially greater per square foot tax revenue than two lots in a transition zone could hope to have from now to eternity. So the question is, what's at issue here? And the greater question is, what do those opposed to this application propose as an alternative? The answer to this is, well, no answer. There was a reference, I take it back, to a town park. I submit this question: at whose expense? Sadly, and as usual, the vocal majority become the silent minority when the rubber meets the road, when real thought and insight are required, when the nuts and bolts of real estate planning and urban design need to be addressed. The truth is, this development speaks more loudly for what it isn't than the disaster that it could be. A review by the opposition would find that even without the two residential lots, the site is approvable for all manner of less attractive options, including fast food drive-through, gas station, car wash, or even a three-story combination of retail and residential, a bonus provision for affordable units. And what about perhaps a motor inn? How about recreating for nostalgia's sake something we all remember well, the Pequot Motor Inn? Don't we miss it? Don't we miss the rattle-trap destination for daytime trysts and derelicts and bedbugs? Don't we miss this historic gateway statement? Residents of Pequot Landing might not agree with that. The fact is, the owner would stand to gain handsomely from any number of invasive projects without the need for a variance. The residential lots could be kept as money in the bank, a bonus for estate planning or future redevelopment. Even as of today, these B-zone lots qualify for two-family homes. Want more, not less residential? More, not less stress on municipal resources? Want yet again increased property taxation? Okay, let's do an as-of-right affordable housing project first, then develop an additional 4 units of housing. Let's have more density cars using, by the way, Kings Highway West, as of right. That's just what we want, I suppose. I don't think so. You can be sure that a third-party developer with no tie to the community would pay handsomely for an opportunity to sky up, bulk up, and bung up the neighborhood. Make a fast buck and get out of town. I submit to you that what we have before us is quite the opposite of the get-rich-quick scheme. Years of time and carrying costs have gone into assembling a parcel capable of creating what will become the best-looking project on an otherwise honky-tonk strip of eyesores. The owner is a resident and conscientious constituent of Fairfield, somebody who's volunteered time and again to keep the town protected from max-out development. This is a responsible, well-conceived, low-rise, low-impact project. Area stakeholders have been invited to have a voice in the evolution of its design. The project will enhance its neighbors' lives, not undermine it. This project will help reduce our tax burden and provide a walkable convenience for everything from iced tea to greeting cards to penicillin to Pampers. And let me emphasize for the benefit of the aging demographic of the audience, Pampers for all sizes and ages. So the question begs, why in the name of sanity deny this requested variance? To preserve two marginal lots of lower and lesser value? Knowing the facts, a reasonable person would call this the tail wagging the dog. I urge opponents of this project to avoid the proverbial shot in the foot. Be learned and mindful of what you're defending against, lest in defending against it, you create it instead. Keep a gate open at the shortcut to the neighborhood market off of Kings Highway West. It's likely you'll seek to walk through it more often than not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Any other members of the public? No? Sir? I don't know if he's coming around here. No. Very good. So that concludes the public comment portion of the public hearing. And it's 10 till 11. So, do you think you can sum up in 10 minutes in rebuttal?
A lot of ground to cover. I think I can come close. But I would encourage the commission that if they had any questions, let us know and we'll keep it open. But let me do what I can in 10
I'll give you, in all candor, I'll give you the prerogative. I mean, that there was a lot of material covered here. I mean, if you want to continue the hearing, and we'll close public comment, but keep it open for rebuttal only for next hearing, which 14th or the 14th.
If I could just have 60 seconds to confer with my client, that'd be great.
Sure.
The commission has indulged all of us for 2 full evenings. I think I'd be doing a disservice to my client and to the process and to the commission and maybe to a certain extent to the neighborhood if we try to cram, a lot of responses into 10 minutes. I mean, I think
You don't
that...
have to say any more. There were some
Okay.
significant arguments and comments made to which I think you need to respond. Am I on now? Thanks. You don't need to say any more. I gave you the option. You're
Perfect. Thank
entitled to take it. There were significant comments and arguments that were made to which, a response is necessary. So that's fine. Closing the public comment portion, I'm going to hold the hearing open for rebuttal. It's going to be scheduled for October 14th.
October 14th?
October 14th is our next regularly
Great.
scheduled meeting.
Thank you.
All right? And I'll adjourn the meeting.